Your family is moving into my house today, I said, and somehow I'm the last person anyone bothered to tell. At 8:10 on Saturday morning, the warning beep of a moving truck pulled me out of bed. I had lived on that quiet street for less than 6 months, and until then, the loudest sound before breakfast had been the sprinklers clicking across my front lawn. I slipped on my robe and walked downstairs, expecting to see a delivery driver at the wrong address. Instead, a 26-foot truck was backing into my driveway while Lauren stood near the garage, calmly directing 2 movers toward my front door. Her parents, Diane and Kyle, waited beside a silver SUV packed to the roof. Her younger sister, Samantha, was holding 3 garment bags and a new set of keys. My son, Ethan, stood near the mailbox with both hands in his pockets, staring at the pavement. "What is this?" I asked. Lauren turned toward me with the same pleasant smile she used when speaking to waiters and bank tellers. "Good morning, Margaret. We wanted to get started early before it gets too warm." One mover rolled a hand truck toward the porch, stacked with boxes labeled primary bedroom. I stepped in front of the doorway. "Started with what?" Lauren glanced at Ethan, but he still would not look at me. "My parents sold their condo," she said. "Samantha's lease ended Friday. Since your house has 5 bedrooms, this makes the most sense for everyone." She said it as if she were explaining where to place a casserole dish. Diane lifted one hand in a small wave. Kyle opened the SUV and began removing golf clubs. Samantha walked past me, studying the upstairs windows. "I'd like the room facing the backyard," she said. "It gets better afternoon light." I felt something inside me turn cold, not from fear, but from clarity. This was no misunderstanding. They had chosen rooms. Packed their belongings. Sold property. Made keys. And every person standing in my driveway had known except me. "Ethan," I said, "tell them to stop." My son finally raised his head. His face carried the tired, apologetic expression of a man hoping someone else would make his decision for him. "Mom, it's temporary," he said. "Lauren's family needed help, and there's plenty of space." Behind him, the movers waited for instructions. Lauren folded her arms and looked at my house as though she were already deciding which walls to repaint. "You won't even notice us after a while," she said. That was when I understood the truth. They were not asking to live with me. They had already decided I was the one who would have to adjust. I kept my hand on the front door and told the movers that nothing else was coming inside until I understood exactly what had been arranged. Lauren gave a soft sigh, as though I were delaying an appointment rather than stopping strangers from moving into my home. Ethan asked the movers to wait by the truck, then followed me into the kitchen. Lauren came in behind him, still holding a folder filled with paint samples and furniture measurements. "How long have you known about this?" I asked Ethan. He rubbed the back of his neck and said they had been discussing it for several weeks. Several weeks. During that time, he had called me twice, eaten dinner at my table, and helped me hang a photograph of his father in the hallway. He had never mentioned that 4 people were preparing to claim my spare bedrooms. "I thought you would understand once everyone was here," he said. Lauren's parents needed a solution. I looked at my son and wondered when my consent had become less important than avoiding an uncomfortable conversation. Lauren placed the folder on the counter. "This is not as dramatic as you are making it sound, Margaret. The house will belong to Ethan someday, and we are only using the space efficiently." Her words settled between us. I asked Ethan whether he had told her that. His eyes shifted toward the window. I said the house would probably stay in the family. "That is not the same as promising it to your wife," I replied. Lauren opened the folder and showed me a floor plan she had printed from the real estate listing. My bedroom was marked in blue ink. The large upstairs guest room had Diane and Kyle's names written across it, and the room facing the backyard was labeled Samantha. My office had been crossed out and renamed family room. "Where am I supposed to work?" I asked. Lauren pointed to the small bedroom beside the laundry room. "You could use that for now. It is on the first floor, which will be better for you eventually. I was 67, healthy, and perfectly capable of climbing my own stairs, but Lauren spoke as though my decline had already been scheduled. Ethan told me no one was trying to push me out. Then I noticed a brochure partly hidden beneath the floor plan. It showed a retirement community 48 miles away. Lauren reached for it too late. My name was written across the top, and beside it was an appointment date for the following Tuesday. I picked up the brochure before Lauren could hide it and read the appointment details twice. The retirement community had my full name, my phone number, and a note describing me as a widow who was considering downsizing soon. I had never contacted them. I had never asked anyone to contact them for me. Who made this appointment? I asked. Lauren kept her voice calm. I only requested information. There is no obligation. Ethan stepped closer and said she had been trying to create options, not make decisions. I looked at the floor plan, the paint samples, and the appointment arranged in my name. Every so-called option required me to leave. From the driveway, Diane called that the movers were charging by the hour. Lauren glanced toward the front window as though that were the real emergency. I told her family to take their belongings somewhere else. Her pleasant expression disappeared for only a second. They cannot, she said. My parents closed on their condo yesterday, and Samantha turned in her apartment keys this morning. I stared at her. Lauren had brought 4 people to my home knowing they had nowhere to return to. Ethan admitted he knew the condo was being sold, but he claimed he believed I would agree once I understood the circumstances. You created the circumstances, I said. Lauren insisted the condo sale had been necessary because her parents could no longer manage the mortgage and association fees. When I asked where they had planned to live if I refused, no one answered. I walked outside and told the movers the delivery had been cancelled. Kyle stopped unloading his golf clubs. Diane's eyes filled with offended disbelief. Samantha said she had already changed her mailing address. Then Diane made a mistake. She told me Lauren had assured them the house was practically Ethan's already. The driveway went silent. I asked how long the condo had been listed. Kyle said 2 months. 2 months earlier, Lauren had visited me with a bottle of wine and spent nearly an hour praising the size of my kitchen. I had thought she was finally trying to become closer to me. Now I remembered her measuring glance toward the upstairs hallway. Ethan tried to explain that he had only said he would probably inherit the house one day. Lauren had turned that careless statement into a promise large enough for her entire family to build their future upon. As the movers closed the truck, Samantha pulled out her phone and asked where they were supposed to go. Before Lauren could answer, I noticed an email open on the screen. The subject line read, "Confirmation of new permanent residence," and beneath it was my address. The email confirmed that Samantha had already changed her permanent address to mine 3 weeks earlier. She had used it for her bank, her employer, and a furniture delivery scheduled for Monday. I handed the phone back and asked Lauren how many decisions had been made in my name. She answered by saying everyone was tired and embarrassed, as though my questions were the problem. Diane stepped forward and reminded me that she and Kyle were in their 60s and had nowhere to sleep that night. Family does not turn family away, she said. I asked whether family sold a home, ended a lease, ordered furniture, and changed legal addresses before receiving permission. Diane lowered her eyes, but Lauren did not. She said the situation was already difficult enough without me making her parents feel unwelcome. Ethan asked if we could let them stay for a few weeks while they found another place. His voice had the same careful tone he used when negotiating with a difficult customer. I told him this was not an unexpected emergency. They had created a plan that depended on my surrender. Kyle said I was being unnecessarily harsh. Samantha began searching for hotels, loudly announcing that rooms nearby cost more than $200 a night. Each complaint was placed at my feet, as if I had caused their lack of preparation. I felt guilty for several minutes, and I hated how easily that guilt arrived. I had spent most of my life helping Ethan before he needed to ask. After his father died, I had paid part of his college debt. I had helped with his wedding and covered the down payment on his first home. Lauren knew generosity was the door I usually left unlocked. "Mom," Ethan said quietly, "you have more space than you need. Maybe this could work until we sort everything out." I asked where he expected me to live while Lauren's family occupied the bedrooms and my office. He looked toward the brochure still lying on the kitchen counter. "The retirement place is only 48 miles away," he said. "You might actually like having people around your age." The words hurt more because he spoke them gently. Lauren added that the community had meals, activities, and transportation, as though she had researched a vacation for me. I looked at my son and understood that he was not asking me to share my home. He was asking me to leave it. When I asked whether a room had already been reserved, Lauren remained silent. Ethan did too. Then Diane glanced at her daughter and said, "I thought Margaret was moving out next month." I looked at Diane, then at Ethan, and something inside me became very still. They had not merely discussed the possibility of my leaving. They had built an entire schedule around it. Lauren finally admitted that she had placed a temporary hold on a one-bedroom unit at the retirement community because availability was limited. She said the deposit was refundable, as though that made using my name without permission reasonable. I did not argue anymore. I told the movers to place the boxes in the garage, where they could remain for 7 days, but no one would be staying in my house. Lauren mistook my calmness for surrender. She thanked me and immediately began discussing which furniture should be brought inside first once I had time to process everything. Ethan looked relieved. His relief told me he believed the hardest part was over. By noon, Lauren's family had checked into an extended stay hotel 6 miles away. I watched the moving truck leave, then locked the garage and called Daniel Reeves, the attorney who had handled my husband's estate. Daniel agreed to meet me Monday morning. I spent Sunday gathering every document connected to the house, including the deed, closing papers, insurance records, and the bank statements showing that I had purchased it entirely with proceeds from the sale of my previous home. At Daniel's office, I told him everything without softening the details to protect Ethan. Daniel listened, then confirmed what I already suspected. The house belonged only to me, and neither Ethan nor Lauren had any legal claim to it. By Tuesday afternoon, we had begun transferring the property into a trust that neither of them could control. I also removed Ethan as the person authorized to manage my finances if I became unable to do so. That decision hurt, but not as much as realizing he had already treated my future as if I were absent from it. Then Daniel mentioned that a retired couple from Colorado had made a strong offer on the house before I bought it. Their agent had recently asked whether I might consider selling. I went home and walked through every room slowly. I touched the oak banister, stood in the kitchen I had once imagined filling with grandchildren, and looked at the photograph of my late husband in the hallway. By Wednesday, I told Daniel to contact the buyers. On Thursday, Lauren came by with paint samples for the primary bedroom. She smiled when I allowed her to measure the wall. What she did not know was that, 3 hours earlier, I had accepted an offer on the house. I looked at Diane and realized Lauren had not merely suggested that I might move someday. She had told her family my departure was already arranged. For the first time that morning, I stopped trying to make them understand why they were wrong. People who had planned around my absence were not waiting for an explanation. They were waiting for me to surrender. I told Lauren that no one would sleep in my house, but I would allow the sealed boxes to remain in the garage for 7 days while her family found temporary housing. Relief moved across every face in the driveway. Lauren mistook my calmness for weakness. She thanked me in the warm, careful voice people use when they believe a difficult conversation has finally ended in their favor. Ethan hugged me and whispered that he knew I would come around. I did not correct him. By noon, Diane and Kyle had booked an extended stay hotel 6 miles away, and Samantha had arranged to stay with a friend. The moving truck left most of their belongings in my garage. Lauren placed the retirement brochure back inside her folder, apparently convinced we would discuss it again after I had time to adjust. When everyone finally left, I locked the front door and called Daniel Reeves, the attorney who had handled my husband's estate. Daniel listened without interrupting. Then he asked whose name appeared on the deed. Mine, I said. He asked whether Ethan had ever contributed to the purchase price or signed any ownership agreement. He had not. Daniel told me to bring every document connected to the house to his office Monday morning. That weekend, I gathered bank statements, closing papers, insurance records, and my will. I also changed the garage code and disabled the extra electronic key Lauren had somehow created. On Monday, Daniel confirmed what I already knew but needed to hear from someone without an emotional stake in the answer. The house belonged entirely to me. Ethan's expectations were not legal rights, and Lauren's plans were not obligations. I transferred the property into a protected trust, revised my estate documents, and removed Ethan's authority to access any of my financial accounts. Then I called the real estate agent who had represented the previous owner. A retired couple from Oregon had once offered $30,000 above my purchase price, but I had declined because I loved the house. The agent said they were still interested. By Wednesday afternoon, I had accepted their offer, with a closing date 3 weeks away. That evening, Lauren texted me photographs of paint colors for the primary bedroom. I replied that the soft gray looked lovely. She had no idea she was decorating a room she would never enter. Lauren treated my short reply about the paint color as permission to continue. 2 days later, she called and announced that she wanted to host a small dinner at my house on Sunday so everyone could discuss the new living arrangement calmly. I almost laughed at the phrase new living arrangement, but I agreed. By then, Daniel had completed the trust documents, the buyers had finished their inspection, and the closing date was fixed. I had spent the week packing personal photographs, my husband's records, and the few pieces of furniture I intended to keep. Everything else could remain for the buyers. On Sunday afternoon, Lauren arrived 3 hours early carrying groceries, flowers, and a stack of fabric samples. Ethan followed with 2 folding chairs. Diane and Kyle brought wine, while Samantha carried a framed print she said would look perfect above the fireplace. No one asked whether they could rearrange anything. Lauren moved my serving dishes, replaced my tablecloth, and placed handwritten name cards around the dining table. Mine was at the far end, beside the kitchen door. During dinner, Lauren spoke brightly about storage, school districts, and the backyard fence Kyle wanted to replace. Diane described where she planned to grow tomatoes. Samantha said she had already ordered a new bed for the upstairs room. Their confidence was almost impressive. They had transformed my refusal into a temporary inconvenience. One of Lauren's friends, Melissa, asked me which room I planned to use once everyone moved in. Before I could answer, Lauren smiled and said, "Margaret will be moving to a lovely retirement community soon. It will be much easier for her there." Ethan lowered his eyes to his plate. No one corrected her. I set down my glass and looked around the table at people discussing my future as though I were absent. "Actually," I said, "I will not be moving to that community." Lauren's smile tightened. "We can talk about alternatives later." "There is no need," I replied. "The house has been sold." For several seconds, the only sound was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Lauren gave a small laugh, waiting for someone else to join her. No one did. Ethan asked what I meant. I told him the buyers would take possession in 3 weeks. Lauren said I could not possibly have completed a sale so quickly. That was when the doorbell rang. Daniel entered carrying a leather folder. He placed a copy of the signed purchase agreement on the table directly in front of her. Lauren stared at the first page, then at me, and finally understood that while she had been choosing paint colors, I had been choosing freedom. Lauren read the purchase agreement twice, then pushed it toward Daniel as though the paper itself had offended her. "You cannot sell a family home without discussing it with the family," she said. Daniel answered in the same calm tone he used in his office. "Margaret is the sole owner. No one else has a legal interest in the property." Diane immediately asked where she and Kyle were supposed to live after the hotel reservation ended. Samantha said her new bed was already being shipped. Every question returned to what my decision had cost them, never to what their plan had intended to cost me. Ethan looked from the contract to my face. "Why did you not tell me?" he asked. "Because you did not tell me about the moving truck, the retirement appointment, or the promise you made with my house," I said. Lauren stood and began gathering her papers. She accused me of humiliating her in front of her family and friends. I reminded her that she had invited those people into my dining room to celebrate taking over a home I had never offered. Daniel then explained that the boxes in my garage had to be removed within 7 days because the buyers would conduct a final walkthrough. Kyle objected, saying they had nowhere large enough to store everything. Daniel handed him the information for 3 storage facilities within 10 miles. Lauren turned to Ethan and demanded that he stop the sale. He said nothing at first. Then he asked Daniel whether there was truly no way to challenge it. Daniel replied that expectations, family relationships, and future inheritance were not ownership. Lauren's face changed when she heard the word inheritance. She told Ethan that he had assured her the house would be theirs and that the money from Diane and Kyle's condo sale could be used to renovate it. Ethan stared at her. "What money?" he asked. The room became still again. Diane looked down at her plate. Lauren had apparently promised her parents that after they moved in, part of the condo proceeds would be invested in improvements, while the remaining amount would stay available until Ethan inherited the property. Ethan asked why none of that money had appeared in their joint account. Lauren said she was managing it separately for the family. He took out his phone and opened their banking application. His expression tightened as he scrolled. There were charges for flooring samples, custom cabinets, and a $5,000 deposit to a remodeling company. "You spent our savings on a house we do not own," he said. Lauren answered that she had been building their future. "I watched my son finally understand that her future depended on mine ending first." For several seconds, Ethan stared at the list of charges on his phone while Lauren insisted that every purchase had been made for them. She said the contractor's deposit could be transferred to another project and that the cabinets would increase the value of the house. Daniel reminded her that the house had already passed inspection and no renovation had been authorized. Lauren turned to Ethan and told him he had to call the buyers, explain the misunderstanding, and convince me to cancel the sale. He looked at her as though he were finally hearing the words instead of the excuses around them. "There was no misunderstanding," he said. "My mother said no, and we decided that did not matter." Lauren replied that marriage meant protecting each other's future. Ethan asked why protecting their future required removing me from mine. Her voice sharpened, but she kept her expression controlled. She reminded him that her parents had sold their condo because of promises he had made. Ethan admitted he had spoken carelessly, but said she had turned one foolish assumption into a complete plan without confirming anything. Diane began crying quietly and asked whether they could at least use the garage until they found a rental. I said they had 7 days, exactly as promised, and not 1 day more. Kyle asked whether I felt any responsibility for the position they were in. "I did not list your home," I said. "I did not end Samantha's lease. I did not make appointments in my own name. Those choices belong to the people who made them." Lauren told Ethan that if he allowed the sale to proceed, he was choosing me over his wife. He looked exhausted, but his answer was clear. "I am choosing the truth over a promise I never had the right to make." She stood, collected her purse, and told him he could come with her or stay behind and explain himself to everyone. Ethan remained seated. Diane and Kyle followed Lauren toward the door, while Samantha paused long enough to say she had trusted her sister. Lauren did not respond. Before leaving, she looked back at me and said I had destroyed their marriage over a house. I told her a house could not destroy something built honestly. The front door closed, and the silence that followed felt different from the silence before. Ethan covered his face with both hands and admitted that he had known Lauren was controlling, but he had mistaken avoiding conflict for keeping peace. Then his phone rang. It was the remodeling company, calling to confirm that Lauren had approved another $12,000 payment from their joint account. The remodeling company agreed to stop the payment after Ethan explained that the property did not belong to him or Lauren, but the deposit already paid was not fully refundable. That loss became the first of several consequences neither of them could avoid. Lauren stayed with her parents at the extended stay hotel for 2 weeks, then moved into a furnished apartment across town. Ethan remained in their house alone while they separated their finances and began counseling. I did not ask for details. For years, I had stepped into every difficult moment of his life before he learned how to stand inside it himself. This time, I let him make his own decisions. 7 days after the dinner, a storage company removed the final boxes from my garage. 3 weeks later, I signed the closing papers and handed the new owners the keys. The sale brought enough money to secure my retirement and purchase a smaller 2-bedroom cottage beside a quiet lake, 20 miles from my closest friends. It had a screened porch, a narrow garden, and windows that filled the kitchen with morning light. There were no extra rooms waiting for people who believed my life was available for rearrangement. I placed my husband's photograph on the mantel and turned the second bedroom into a reading room with a comfortable chair facing the water. Several months passed before Ethan visited. He arrived carrying coffee and a small toolbox, though there was nothing in the cottage that needed repair. We sat on the porch while leaves moved across the lake. He told me that he and Lauren were living separately and that more hidden expenses had surfaced after the dinner. He did not blame her for everything. He admitted that his silence had given her permission to keep going. "I treated your future like it was already over," he said. "I am sorry." I believed he meant it, but belief was not the same as restored trust. I told him forgiveness could begin that day, while trust would take longer. When he stood to leave, he glanced at the hook beside my door. "Do you want me to have a spare key?" he asked. I smiled, not unkindly. "Not yet." He nodded, and for once, he did not argue. After his car disappeared down the road, I returned to the porch and watched the evening settle over the lake. My new home was smaller than the one Lauren had wanted, but every inch of it held something the old house had nearly lost: my voice, my choice, and the certainty that no one would ever again decide how long I was allowed to remain in my own life.